I've been driving for the last 2 hours, heading to the Marriott Hotel in Baltimore. My wife was there for a conference, and I was going to surprise her by stopping by and inviting her to dinner. Do you think I am filled with love and tenderness for my wife? Nothing like this. For the past 3 months, I have suspected that my wife is having an affair with one of her coworkers. I had an intuitive feeling that every time she went on another business trip, training, or conference, she was actually having sex with someone. So tonight, I was going to catch her in the act and end this once and for all. A little background. My wife, Megan, and I have been married for 14 years and have two wonderful children, 12-year-old Sarah and 10-year-old Todd. Before today's meeting, I dropped them off at my mom's, and they are now at her house. Megan and I got married right after high school. During the last 2 years of study, we dated, and this rapprochement became a natural prologue to our marriage. Young Megan was a spectacular girl, and by her nature she was always cheerful. She was slender, had long chestnut-colored hair, and was distinguished by her unusually chiseled, expressive features. Megan's figure still looks so flawless that not a single extra gram of fat can be found in it. Overall, I always thought that we had a strong and loving marriage until about 3 months ago, when I began to have suspicions that something was going wrong. At first, it was some little things that I couldn't understand or explain. I didn't want to pester Megan with questions about this, or, especially, enter into a confrontation with her, because I was afraid of seeming somehow paranoid or jealous. The location of her workshop today was set close enough that I could make a surprise visit, and perhaps catch the harlot in the act. I grabbed my business briefcase from the car and approached the administrator in the hotel lobby. "Hi, I'm Phil Jenkins." I introduced myself at the reception desk with a short smile and a business style. My wife Megan came to an insurance conference and told me she was staying in room 214. She said I could get the key here. After tapping on the computer keyboard and checking the entries, the employee nodded and turned around, taking the required key. "Can I see your ID, please?" he asked before handing it to me. "No problem. It's good that you asked," I complimented, taking out and showing my driver's license. So, the key was received and held tightly in my fist, but I was nervous as hell as I walked to the elevator. A variety of thoughts arose and jumped chaotically in my head. What will I do when I catch her? What will I tell her? Both of them. What should I do when I approach the door of my room? Knock or just burst in? What should I do if, in addition to the lock, the door is closed with a security chain? Damn, what if Megan is there alone? And will she even be in the room? Coming out of the elevator and already walking along the corridor, I decided to simply insert the key into the lock and try to open the door. Let's see what happens. I tried to be as quiet as possible, literally moving the key in the lock millimeter by millimeter and barely audibly unlocking the door. I carefully opened it, to find Megan sitting half-turned to me at the table with her open briefcase, doing paperwork. Apparently, having felt something, she sharply turned around and jumped up in her chair, screaming in surprise and pressing her hands to her chest. "Damn it, Phil, you scared me to death. What the hell are you doing here?" she exclaimed, gasping with fear mixed with irritation. "Hi, dear. I had a little free time, and I decided to drop in here and invite you to dinner." I automatically gave out my basic version, which justified my unexpected visit. "Great, you're staying the night, aren't you? I'm sure I could use a little company." Megan, having recovered from her shock, came closer and kissed me deeply. "Well, it looks like my grand plan to catch my cheating wife has fallen apart and been a complete fiasco. Do we have time for a quick joke before we head out to dinner?" I asked hopefully. "Hey, I need to take a shower first, but I'll tell you what." The wife rested her fists on her waist and tilted her head to the side. "How about I give you a quick pleasure before I rinse off? But after we get back from dinner, we'll have the whole night to do whatever you want," she purred playfully. Megan quickly undressed and threw her clothes on the floor. Swaying her hips, she came and squatted in front of me. Megan has always been an expert in satisfying the male dignity, and she herself knew this very well. So right now, I was extremely glad that I was wrong about her cheating. I loved this woman and did not want to lose her. As always, she expertly brought me to climax. I closed my eyes in pleasure. Oh yes, it was simply divine as always with Megan. Well, this will be enough for you until dinner. As if in a fog, I heard her satisfied voice and opened my eyes. With a wide grin on her face, she easily rose from her knees, turned around, and walked into the bathroom to take a shower. I took advantage of the respite to clean myself up and fell onto the bed. Looking around, I noticed that Megan's makeup bag was lying on the dresser against the wall. I got out of bed and went over to see if she had any aspirin to get rid of the headache that was throbbing in my temples after the tiring driving. I didn't find any pills, or I simply didn't have time to get to them, because in the side pocket of her purse I caught something strange. I reached in and pulled out a six-pack of condoms. Holding these condoms in my hand and stupidly staring at them with an incomprehensible gaze, I automatically took a few steps back and collapsed back onto the bed. The fact is that after the birth of Todd, Megan began taking birth control pills. They made her constantly sick, so we decided that I would have a vasectomy. From then on, we did not need to use any contraception. It was nice to get rid of any problems and concerns with condoms and the pill. Naturally, now I immediately had a reasonable question. Why the hell are these elastic bands in her cosmetic bag, and in such quantities? Well, I'm no fool, and I quickly came to the conclusion that my wonderful wife was indeed cheating on me. The pain that tormented my head seemed to intensify even more with such news, so I did not immediately figure out what I should do now with this knowledge. But one thought that seemed sensible to me nevertheless came to me. After rummaging around a little more in Megan's surprisingly well-stocked purse, I found a couple of safety pins that she kept for emergencies with her clothes. Taking one of the pins, I carefully made almost invisible holes in the middle of each package of condoms, and then I put the pins and condoms in the place where I found them. She was still fiddling around in the shower, even seeming to hum something over the sound of the water, so I took my cell phone and called a friend of mine at home. "Freddie, this is Phil." "Yeah, hi. I need you to do me a favor." "No problem. What should I do?" he answered. "Wait about an hour from now, and then call me on my mobile and tell me that a pipe burst at school and they need me as soon as possible. Although, in fact, all that is required of you is just to call, and everything else is my concern." "Got it, buddy." Fred confirmed his participation without any unnecessary questions. "Then I'll call around 7. See you, buddy." After zoning out, I thought some more and decided that I didn't really want to spend the night with my wife. Now I already felt sorry for what Megan and I had done just a few minutes ago, and I didn't want to add anything loving to it. On the way home, I will be able to carefully consider my situation and next steps. I knew I would have to do something, but at that moment I couldn't think of what. When Megan finally got out of the shower, the main thing for me was to restrain myself and not start a showdown with her right in the room. This was quite a difficult task, because everything was boiling inside me, and the only thing I wanted was to cause the same pain to this woman who was my wife that she had doomed me to. Frankly speaking, I am not a cruel person at all. I never lose my composure and try to remain calm in any situation. Moreover, after mature reflection, I decided that it would be better for me if for the time being I did not let her understand that I knew at least something about her infidelity. And yet, still, by the time we got to the hotel restaurant, I was completely crushed by her betrayal. "Order what you want, dear. I can pay for everything," I suggested to Megan, as carefree as I could show. "Well, I'm not that hungry." She waved it off vaguely, studying the menu. "I think I'll just take a small filet." "That sounds good to me too," I agreed. "How about adding a bottle of rose wine to your order?" After the waiter took the order, I still couldn't resist. I had to probe the waters a little by asking a couple of questions that at first glance seemed completely innocent. "Megan, are you happy with the way our marriage is going?" I began, playing with the fork and knife with my fingertips. "Of course," she answered with confidence. "I have a wonderful home, 2 wonderful children, and a loving husband. What more could I ask for? Oh, I don't know. I guess sometimes I just wonder if I'm doing everything I can to make you happy. I am so lucky to have such an amazing wife. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe that this is true. I had to put a smile on my face. Oh, you silly thing. Megan cooed with some elusive tenderness in her voice. So that's why you came all this long way to see me? Well, honey, I don't think you have anything to worry about. I am absolutely happy and satisfied, and you, for your part, are doing everything right. A woman cannot wish for a better husband than you. The waiter brought our orders, and Megan and I spent the entire dinner making small talk about nothing. Just as the plates were being cleared away, my cell phone rang, which I had been waiting for. After apologizing to Megan, I walked out of the dining room and into the lobby so as not to disturb other patrons of the restaurant. Pressing the phone to my ear, I waited a few minutes and came back. It was Freddie, I told my wife as she looked at me questioningly. There was a water pipe break at school, and I honestly need to get back there as soon as possible. Sorry, but I have to cancel our night together. There was a look of disappointment on Megan's face, and at that moment I couldn't tell if it was real or not. However, for her immediate future, it did not matter whether I stayed or left. In any case, she will answer for betraying my trust. As we entered the elevator, Kirk Langford was just getting out. He was a business partner that Megan always seemed to travel with. "Oh, hi, Megan," he hesitated. "I went to your room to see if you wanted to have dinner, but no one answered my knock." Now I understand why. He extended his hand to me and introduced himself. "Kirk Langford, you must be Phil. Megan talks about you all the time." "Phil came to stay with me for the night," Megan explained, "but an emergency arose and he will have to return." "Looks like I'll have to sleep alone again today," she sighed and casually complained. It was not easy to shake hands with this wife's colleague and put a sweet smile on his face. While my wife and I were riding up in the elevator, I had to bring up the topic that had been bothering me again. "Megan, I would really like you to leave your job, and I would feel safer if you didn't work with Kirk. We have already discussed this before, and for me it is important. I emphasize the significance of my words. Phil, I already told you that I'm not going to quit my job," she answered with a noticeable tinge of displeasure in her voice. "I love what I do, and I learn a lot from Kirk. What you really need is to get over your paranoia about me and Kirk." We made the further journey to the room in silence. I took my unpacked bags, and after a quick, careless kiss, I went home. The whole way back, I couldn't stop thinking that Kirk would definitely stop by Megan's room right after dinner. I didn't even want to imagine what they would do next because of the anger overwhelming me. Basically, by the time I got home, I felt exhausted and my mind completely exhausted. And my head hurt again, almost worse than before. By evening, I had already begun to hate my wife for what she did to me. How I wish I could be one of those resourceful guys who can almost come up with all these clever ways on the spot that help them catch their cheating wives, but I was in some kind of stunned prostration. What tangible actions could I take with what I discovered in Baltimore? I couldn't even come up with a plausible enough reason not to have sex with her. What I really wanted was a divorce, and the sooner the better. But again, I did not have enough strong evidence of Megan's infidelity that I could present to her, much less in court. I felt defeated because my wife was cheating on me, and I knew it and could do nothing about it. I wasn't going to put up with it, but I needed outside help. Megan returned home 2 days later, beaming with a happy smile, like a schoolgirl who got 3 A's in a row. I saw that she had a great time at this conference, and at the same time, apparently, on the sidelines, and this angered me even more. I secretly checked her purse, and in the already familiar inner pocket, there was only one condom left from the entire package. And yes, it still had the puncture I made, invisible to the uninformed eye. Sex with Megan that night was more of a routine than the pleasure it used to be. On Saturday, there was a traditional picnic for the insurance company Globus Insurance, where my wife worked. At least the kids had something to do. As for me, I was not at all looking forward to this day. I couldn't help but think that some people in the company knew what was going on, and to some extent, I felt like a cuckold. A very uncomfortable and unpleasant feeling, I tell you. My imagination painted me pictures of people around me casting grinning glances at me and exchanging meaningful glances at each other. It is quite possible that none of this actually happened, but I still tried to keep a low profile so as not to become the butt of crude jokes. Of course, you could say that I was a little paranoid, but I couldn't help it. Unlike me, Megan really enjoyed having fun with everyone invited, and especially Kirk. They didn't show their close affection publicly, but they were definitely quite friendly in their interactions with each other. Both of them ignored me, but right now that suited me just fine. "Hi, I'm Janet Langford, and you must be Phil Jenkins." A female voice suddenly came from somewhere behind and to the side. I turned around and she was simply stunning. At this moment, I was truly stunned. Until that moment, I thought my wife looked great, but Janet Langford was the epitome of a flamboyant pin-up beauty straight out of a magazine spread. Her head was adorned with long brown hair, and her large blue eyes were magnetic on her face. Janet's figure was striking in its ideal proportions, even despite her small stature. The million-dollar question: why would Kirk Langford cheat on such a beauty? "Oh, excuse me," I finally caught myself, feeling that I was blushing desperately. "You caught me daydreaming." "Hello?" "Yes, I'm Phil. Nice to meet you. Can we go somewhere and talk? Preferably somewhere where there are no children or noisy people around," she asked, throwing a concerned look towards the lively crowd. "Of course, let's take a walk along the lake," I readily suggested. "Looks like no one here will miss me." "For me too," she responded, casually waving her hand. About 100 meters from the picnic clearing, in relative solitude, there were several nice benches that offered a picturesque view of the lake. We settled down on one of them. "I'm all ears. What would you like to talk about?" Interrupting the pause that had arisen for a short time, I asked her. Janet seemed to be at a loss as she hesitated to answer. You see, this is difficult for me. I don't know how best to tell you." She corrected herself. "You about this. Let's just say this is a very sensitive topic." At that moment, I realized that this made our conversation easier, and I decided to make it easier for her. "You mean the affair between Kirk and my wife?" I directly voiced this treacherous equation in relation to both of us. "I only found out about him this week." Upon hearing my confession, Janet seemed visibly relieved and shared her own information with me. "I've known about this for about 2 months now," she said. "Now I'm preparing to file for divorce, but I need a little help. I hired a detective to get me evidence of his infidelity, but my lawyer said that I would have a much better chance of winning the case if Megan agreed to testify, or at least sign a notarized statement confirming their intimate relationship." "What do you mean about evidence?" I decided to clarify this important issue. "I have photographs and recordings of telephone conversations. The detective hasn't been able to obtain any video footage yet, but the photographs are pretty good as evidence. In addition, I have a list of dates and times of their dates." At the last word, she curled her beautiful, sensual lips with disgust. "I can try to help," I offered, relieved that I wouldn't have to fight this alone. "I'm not sure how exactly yet, but I'll try to work on it." "Do you think your lawyer could help me with my divorce papers using some of the evidence you've collected? I would really appreciate it because right now I have no evidence at all." Janet nodded in agreement and continued. "In addition, I will sue Globus. I already have several statements from employees that confirm that some of the company's leaders knew about this affair but did nothing to stop it. My lawyer will give these bigwigs a choice: fire them both or face $1 million lawsuit." "Wow," I whistled, admiring her determination. "I can only say that I am certainly impressed. Tomorrow morning Kirk is playing golf. Can you come to my house around noon?" she asked, fixing her piercing blue eyes on me. How could I refuse such an offer? "He won't be there until late evening. I'll show you what I have, and together we can decide what our future strategy will be. I live at 206 Hemlock Avenue in Crestmont." "Okay, it's a date. Sorry, not really a date, but In general, you know what I mean, I was embarrassed, but Janet just smiled, lightly slapping my hand, and we both laughed. Now I felt more comfortable than ever next to this stunningly beautiful woman. Having agreed to meet, we walked back to the picnic area. As I said, during our absence, no one missed us, and not a single soul missed us. But now I feel much better. Maybe this whole damn mess in my life will end soon. At least I really hope so. As I expected, the next morning Megan announced to me that she needed to do some shopping and would be gone for a couple of hours. After she left, I dropped the kids off at my mom's and headed to Crestmont. Janet met me at the door, and we went into the home office. There was a beautiful leather sofa, and on the table in front of it was a large computer monitor. The screen showed an image of an empty motel room. She motioned for me to sit down. I have beer, soda, and wine. What would you want? She asked when I sat comfortably on the sofa. Regular soda will do, or Pepsi if you have it. When she returned with a cold can and handed me soda, I thanked her and remarked, "So, I have all your attention, Janet. Would you be so kind as to tell me what's going on?" "Well, in a few minutes, we will see how my dear husband plays golf, live and in the most colorful format," she answered in a voice full of caustic sarcasm. "I hope you don't get too upset, but I think you'll recognize him as a caddy." "How the hell did you do this?" I marveled, opening my soda. "It cost me $1,400 to put this together, and I really hope it was worth it. However, the money I spent was debited from Kirk's card. However, he doesn't even know about it." Janet grinned, and then continued. "I expect this will last about 2 hours, so make yourself comfortable," she suggested. "Besides drinks, I also have popcorn and nachos that will help us pass the time. By the way, I will receive a DVD of the entire session and would be happy to share a copy with you. In fact, I don't really want to look at this spectacle." I winced sourly, but on the other hand, I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. "Strange, right? Okay, let the show begin." For the next 20 minutes, while nothing interesting was happening on the screen, Janet and I chatted a bit. She showed me the information she had collected about this office romance, and I was truly amazed by the number of photographs, videos, and documents she had. But at the same time, I was mentally crushed, because now I knew exactly what, when, and how Megan was doing. I was surprised to learn that the Langfords have 3 large koi ponds in their backyard. In our conversation, I expressed the hope that I would have the opportunity to admire them, and asked Janet if I could somehow bring the children to her for this purpose. She seemed pleased and flattered by my sincere interest, and said that she would be happy to invite them to visit. Around the same time, some action began on the monitor, and we had to interrupt. As Janet had predicted, Kirk and Megan entered the room and wasted no time in immediately starting to take off their clothes. There was no small talk or even foreplay between the lovers. They simply took off their clothes and immediately jumped onto the bed. The transmitted image was excellent, but the sound was slightly distorted. However, this did not matter much, since the main evidence was a clear and unambiguous picture of depraved adultery. I think you can understand that I felt a little awkward sitting on the couch next to a near stranger and watching my wife and her husband having passionate sex. The action that unfolded on the monitor before our eyes only caused me disgust, to say the least. I had to admit that they acted like a well-coordinated team, and by all accounts, they were having a great time together. "Janet, I hate to interrupt the show, but do we have to watch all this?" Turning away from the screen, I turned to the hostess of the house. "As I understand it, this is something you don't want to look at," she said with a bit of sympathy. "That's for sure," I agreed with her. "Honestly, it's not the most pleasant sight to watch my wife having sex with another man, especially since I feel a little awkward when you sit next to me." "Well, all this is automatically recorded," she waved her hand, "and thanks to these records, we will have all the necessary evidence for lawyers. We don't have to look any further, and I also can't say that I received at least some pleasure from this movie. In any case, the subsequent plot seems quite predictable." "What now, Phil? Are you going home or what?" Janet asked. Actually, I was hoping you would show me your koi pawns. I think they would be much more interesting to watch than 2 hours of sweaty puffing. Janet's eyes seemed to light up with excitement, simply because I showed interest in her favorite hobby. She jumped up from the couch, and as we walked to the back of the house, Megan's screams reached my ears from the video, apparently reaching another climax. As I stepped out into the fresh air, I could not help thinking that I was in for a more pleasant time than my wife. Janet's 3 ornamental fish ponds turned out to be truly wonderful. I was particularly interested in complex water pumping and filtration systems, having spent some time working as a plumber before taking a job at the school. According to Janet, Kirk was not at all helpful with her hobby, and she had to find and hire people herself for all the work required with laying pipes and installing pumps. Hearing this, I, of course, offered to come and help her any time Kirk went off to play his favorite golf. Honestly, I wasn't trying to hit on Janet. I just wanted to learn more about the koi ponds, however. Spending more time with this striking woman was an added bonus. Only after a few hours, which seemed to fly by too quickly, we returned back to the house. The picture on the monitor showed that the motel room was already empty, so we decided that it was time for me to go home too. Janet promised to call me when Kirk had his next golf game so that I could come see her again, this time with Sarah and Todd. The next few weeks were difficult. Every time Megan took a shower, I checked her purse. Surprisingly, there was always a new supply of condoms in the secret pocket. I couldn't understand when she managed to use them all. I attached a temporarily expropriated safety pin to my keychain and used it to methodically poke holes in the condoms she had prepared, expecting any day now that Megan would suddenly want to pay her sister a visit. During the evenings, when Kirk went to hit white balls on the green lawns, our children vied with Megan about their visits to the lady with lots and lots of koi, but she never seemed interested in their stories. Sarah and Todd showed her pictures of the fish they had drawn and talked about the names they called them, but Megan never made the connection between Kirk's wife and the koi owner. She seemed relieved that I could keep the kids occupied while she had sex with her sex maestro. I made 2 more attempts to get her to quit her job and stop seeing Kirk. Both times I received the same refusal, and the second one was disgusting in its form. On top of everything else, I had to come up with all kinds of excuses not to have sex with her, to which Megan responded with several sarcastic barbs about my masculine abilities. Her derogatory epithets hurt my self-esteem a little, but it made it easier to justify all the actions I've been taking lately. On Tuesday night, she finally dropped the expected bombshell. "Phil, I've been feeling too stressed lately. I'm going to take a few days off from work and go visit my sister. I think, for about a week. What do you say you could watch the kids while I recover a little?" "Hey, I understand everything," I immediately responded. "You work a lot of overtime and stay late at the office. So yes, I think it would be good for you to relax and unwind. A trip to see your sister is much better than a whole year of sessions with a psychiatrist, and also much cheaper. Go and have a good time, and I'll take care of everything," I admonished her. "Oh, I'm so glad that you understand me." Megan's voice oozed honey notes. "All this overtime work is necessary for the benefit of our family, but it seems that I still went a little overboard with the workload. That night, I had difficulty falling asleep. My thoughts were constantly spinning around what I had to do the next day. What I was really happy about was that it was finally time to act. Megan's sister, Nancy, and her husband, Brad, lived about 3 hours away from us. In principle, Brad was a good guy, but alas, a completely henpecked man. If Nancy had said jump, Brad would have jumped without thinking. The most interesting thing is that in the city where they lived, there are 2 clinics that provide abortions. Of course, I was prepared for the expected developments, and I already had the names, addresses, and opening hours of both clinics. I even read the terms of the agreements that women required to serve in each of them. In both clinics, a necessary requirement before an abortion was a 2-day period of preparation for the patient for examination and taking various tests. This meant that the earliest Megan could book an appointment for the procedure was Friday, assuming her first appointment was on Wednesday. I decided that Megan would try to get everything done as quickly as possible so that she would have a few days to recover before returning home. Thus, I had a day and a half left to draw up a plan of my own actions. No problem. After Megan left to rest and recuperate, I began to arrange my own affairs. I had to explain to my parents what was happening. It was hard to admit that my marriage had failed, but my mom and dad understood and supported me. The kids were happy to stay with them, and Dad's pickup truck would come in handy for transporting Megan's things. I called my lawyer, who said that he had already prepared all the necessary documents so that I could pick them up on Thursday morning. Janet's paperwork was also fully prepared, and she arranged for Kirk to be served at the same time Megan received her divorce papers. The only problem with my plan was that I felt like I had to give Megan one last chance to make things right. However, I didn't have much hope for this. For the rest of the day, Dad and I were busy gathering and packing Megan's things. On Thursday morning, after 3 hours of driving, I arrived at the first clinic. It turned out to be closed. There was only one left, called the Family Planning Center. I approached the administrator, putting on the most confident look I could muster. "Good morning, my name is Phil Jenkins. My wife Megan said I had to come and sign a consent form." "What form is this?" The lady looked at me blankly. "Sorry, I don't know the exact name, but as far as I can tell, it's a form that says I understand everything that's going on with my wife, I agree with it, and I won't sue." "Or something like that," I explained. "Wait a minute." The lady ran her fingers over the computer keyboard and then stared at the monitor. "Yes, Sue. It was Megan Jenkins, right?" "Yes, exactly. Do you need my ID or something else?" I asked, radiating a readiness to claim my rights. She shook her head and clicked her mouse for a few more seconds, checking information about my wife. "Her sister already signed for her, but your signature would really be better." "Wait a minute, I'll get her file." Bingo. Now I just had to hold out for the next couple of minutes. The lady receptionist placed a form in front of me and asked me to sign just below the signature left by Nancy. I noticed that the procedure itself had already been scheduled for 11 o'clock on Friday morning, and they had to arrive at the clinic an hour earlier. "Do we have to pay anything else for this?" I asked, taking my checkbook out of my inside pocket and placing it on the counter. No, your wife has already paid the entire amount, $800 in cash. At the moment, there is no need to pay anything else," she said. "Thank you very much. I appreciate your help. This makes things much easier," I thanked this kind lady, after which I left the clinic with a light heart. You won't believe what a stunningly warm welcome I was given when I was completely unexpected by both sisters, came to Nancy and Brad's house. The emotions flowed so falsely that in fact it was even funny, and I could hardly restrain myself not to give myself away. Megan started with this. "Phil, what a wonderful surprise. What are you doing here?" "Well, Mom and Dad wanted to take the children with them for a few days, so I took sick leave and decided to stop by to see you guys. I think you can say that I, like you dear, also need to unwind a little," I said with a completely innocent look. After this news, a surprised silence suddenly reigned in the room. I saw them start looking at each other, and the gears in their heads were probably all spinning at full capacity right now. I put them in a difficult position, and now they had to somehow get out. I noticed Nancy stand up from her seat and nod at Brad to join her in the kitchen. Smiling at me tightly, she hurried out of the room, and Brad rushed after his wife. While they were conferring there in the kitchen, Megan kept me busy, making small talk and chattering about various trifles. A few minutes later, Brad returned to the room and was already alone. "Phil, I have a great idea," he blurted out with demonstrative animation. "Tomorrow I can take time off from work and borrow a boat from my friend Jack. We can get out of here early and spend the day at the lake. There is excellent fishing there, and sometimes you come across such perches." With the panache of a true fisherman, Brad spread his arms to the sides. "Besides, this way we won't bother the ladies present. How do you like this offer, buddy?" He stared at me with a little worried expectation. Sounds tempting, Brad. A calm day in the vastness of the lake will relieve me of all worries and worries. It's decided. By the way, find out at the same time if Jack can come with us, okay? Fine. I'll arrange everything, Brad promised, pleased that he was able to successfully complete the task received from Nancy. In general, relief from how everything turned out in the end was clearly visible on the faces of all three. We had a serene dinner and sat for the rest of the evening, chatting about nothing. Sex that night, of course, was out of the question, because Megan didn't want her sister to hear any indecent sounds. The next morning, which turned out to be clear and sunny, Jack showed up early in his pickup truck with a trailer containing a boat. Brad was preparing lunch in the kitchen, filling his thermal bag with beer at the same time. We chatted a bit while we loaded the back of the car and the boat with provisions and fishing gear. "Why are you stuck there?" Brad's voice came from the depths of the pickup as I paused at the open passenger door. "Come on, jump in and let's go. The fish won't catch itself." "No, Brad, I decided not to go," I dumbfounded him. "I suggest you and Jack get some rest today because I don't think you'll want to see Nancy in the next few hours." Brad argued with me for another 5 minutes about whether I should go with them or not, until I finally had to be rude to him. After a couple of well-chosen curse words and a few physical threats, Jack and Brad spat and drove off. I returned to the house and poured myself a cup of coffee. After some searching, I soon found Nancy's cell phone and turned it off. Then I picked up the landline phone and dialed my father's number. He always got up early, so Dad and I talked for about 2 hours. During our conversation, the incoming call waiting signal on the phone came on about 6 times. It must have been Brad, who had been trying in vain to reach Nancy all this time. He never succeeded and finally gave up. Then I heard some noises coming from above, apparently Nancy and Megan waking up and getting up, so I said goodbye to my father and prepared for the inevitable fireworks. I cleared the home phone's answering machine of Brad's missed calls and turned Nancy's cell phone back on. In less than 2 hours, both sisters were supposed to be at the family planning center. In less than 5 minutes, I had to meet face-to-face with two angry and hissing cats. Well, I was ready. The boys and I had already drained the first coffee pot in the morning, so I filled it up and set a new one for my loving wife and her sister accomplice coming down the stairs. "Phil, what the hell are you doing here?" Megan gasped, stopping abruptly on the threshold of the kitchen. "For some reason, I didn't want to spend the whole day fishing," I answered, shrugging, "and I decided to just be with you today, my dear girls. I was thinking that we could go to some cozy place and have lunch together. Eh? What do you think of the idea? I had to get home tonight, so I didn't want to spend the whole day with Brad and Jack in that stinking boat." "No, no, this will not work." They began to shout vyingly, but then quickly looked at each other, and Megan took the floor. "Nancy and I have some plans for today, and we would prefer to go into the city together. I can go with you anywhere and at any time, but Nancy and I only see each other a couple of times a year." "Damn it, you'll be here all week, Megan," I protested. "I think you can give me at least half a day, since I've come all this long way. You'll have the rest of the week to do your girly things with your sister." Nancy grabbed her cell phone and hurried out of the kitchen, hitting the speed dial button along the way. Megan collapsed on her butt on the nearest kitchen chair, curling up as if a truck had just crashed into her stomach. Even a few walls away, we could hear Nancy on the phone yelling at poor Brad as if he had just committed the crime of the century. I felt sorry for this guy, but he married her with his eyes open. "Phil, I don't want to fight about this, but Nancy and I really don't want you following us around today. Our whole day is scheduled minute by minute, and you don't fit into it at all," Megan said angrily, in whose voice the approach of a storm front was clearly felt. Okay, I raised my palms. "Tell me what your plans are for today, and then I'll decide what to do. If I don't like it, I'll do something else, and I still don't understand what the problem is, because you have a whole week ahead of you here, and I only have today. Listen, girls, are you by any chance dating a couple of guys?" I threw in an assumption, as if it was a joke. "No, damn it, we're not dating any guys. Megan began to boil. We just wanted to go shopping and maybe buy a few intimate items. Bras, panties, and sexy nightgowns. And we don't want you to hang around and stare at all these things and at us when we try them on. Well, most of these stores are located in a shopping center, so I can occupy myself with other things while you are in the fitting rooms, I said calmly, not at all intending to make life easier for these two conspirators. We'll go to the center together, and there I'll go about my business and won't disturb you. Seriously, girls, you don't have to worry about entertaining me, and when it's time for lunch, I'll take you to some fancy place to make up for any possible inconvenience, I suggested, turning my absolutely innocent eyes from Megan to her sister, who had reappeared in the kitchen. Nancy stood in the doorway, filled with bile, and glared at me. However, she did not say a word, apparently awaiting Megan's decision. My wife realized that she would not be able to convince me, and it seemed that she was ready to give up. Finally, Megan, after playing with her nodules for a few seconds, suddenly stood up and said, "I need to go get dressed," since both of them were still in their dressing gowns. When she quickly left the kitchen with a sweeping step, Nancy, barely having time to step aside in the doorway, looked back at me. You're a real boring ass, you know that?" she spat in my direction. Following this, she turned around and hurried upstairs after Megan, and a wide and satisfied smile spread across my face. After about 20 minutes of muttering and creaking floors in the bedrooms, the call button on the house phone lit up. Apparently, someone upstairs was calling someone. The clock was ticking. They had an hour left to get to the center. I was trying to figure out what my next step should be. If they tried to sneak out of the house without me, I would just follow them and make sure they knew about it. However, I didn't think that they would dare to do this trick. And so, 20 minutes later, they both went down the stairs. "Okay, Phil, let's go shopping, we're ready," Megan announced as if nothing had happened. This turned out to be a little easier than I thought. The call upstairs that I witnessed must have been to Planned Parenthood, and I bet they arranged to reschedule the clinic appointment. Since I mentioned to them that I was heading home that evening, they probably decided that the best way to solve the problem was to just wait until I left. I wasn't trying to stop Megan from having an abortion, but I was trying to make it harder for her. When the three of us left the house, I insisted on taking my car because I wanted to drive myself. All I needed was for these bitches to leave me somewhere along the road and run away. After driving a few miles from Nancy's house, I turned into the nearest service station I could see. Slowly and methodically, I filled the tank, checked the oil and water levels, and thoroughly wiped the windshield. This was the longest time I have ever spent servicing my car in my conscious driving life. All this time, I glanced out of the corner of my eye at the sisters fidgeting in their seats. They were simply seething with anger. This means that my plan worked, and in the most excellent way. When we arrived at the shopping center, I parked further away so we could take a proper stroll. As soon as our little group was inside the mall, I practically left them alone. Although I kept an eye on them from afar, I didn't care what they were doing or what they were buying. They don't look like they're having fun. They spent most of the time discussing something rather emotionally and gesticulating nervously. However, the conspirators bought a few things just to show me that they were shopping. I tried to stay in the shadows, but not let them out of sight. The heated discussion between the sisters was definitely about something serious. While we were maneuvering around the shopping center, the time for the appointment at the clinic passed. So I managed to delay the inevitable for a while. Of course, I understood that Megan would still have the procedure, so I was not going to interfere further with the course of things. Shortly after noon, Nancy and Megan returned to the mall's central courtyard, where I had made an appointment for them to finish their shopping. We had lunch at the nice Olive Garden restaurant and returned home around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. On the way home, and even during lunch, there was little conversation. I tried to restrain myself, but all the time I smiled to myself. I knew these two bitches hated me right now, but I didn't give a fuck. What a wonderful feeling. After lunch, I grabbed a couple of bottles of beer from the refrigerator and relaxed on the couch. Soon, Brad finally returned home from his fishing trip, and was immediately bombarded with verbal abuse from Nancy, which lasted at least half an hour. Unable to withstand such an aggressive attack, Brad barely slipped out the door and disappeared for a couple of hours. He returned to dinner. When I saw him, for a second it seemed to me that after an unequal verbal battle with his wife, the poor fellow's face had flattened a little, and his ears had curled into tubes. But perhaps in the twilight I only imagined it. After the girls finished with the dishes, I asked Brad and Nancy if Megan and I could talk privately in the kitchen. Nancy gave me one of her amused grins, and they both walked into the living room. It was clear from Megan's appearance that she was still upset about what happened that day, and in her state, it would be difficult for me to find a common language with her. First of all, Megan, I would like to ask you again. Could you please, I insisted, quit your job and stop dating Kirk Langford? Her cheekbones tensed as Megan clenched her jaw and, apparently, could only barely restrain herself from hitting me. Damn it. I don't want to hear that crap ever again, she hissed through her teeth. I'm tired of you constantly harping on this, and I'm not going to waste my time answering your stupid questions anymore. You already know the answer. He's the same as he's always been, and that won't change. Now either change the record or get the hell out of here, she said irritably, her eyes flashing. Not surprised by what I heard, I reached for a voluminous envelope made of thick manila paper, which was lying next to me on the chair, and took out another envelope of a regular size from it. Well, Megan, I've asked you this at least 10 times over the past 2 months, and each time you refused to comply with my request. I had no other choice, I warned her, sighing. Megan, here are the divorce papers. I put my hand on the large envelope. All you have to do is sign them and mail them. As you can see, they come with a stamped, self-addressed envelope. If you decide that you need a lawyer to review the papers, please do so. That is your right. Megan looked at me intently and then leaned forward and loomed in front of me, resting her hands on the table. You stupid son of a bitch, she growled angrily. You can't divorce me just because I don't want to quit my job or only hang out with friends you approve of. If you want to get a divorce, you must have good reasons for this, and you don't have them. She pushed away from the table and stepped back, sitting on the chair and leaning back. The look in her eyes was cold and hard. The straight back and crossed arms also indicated that my stubborn wife was not going to compromise. I think it's time for you to go home and pull yourself together, she continued. I'm your wife, and I don't intend to leave my home and family just because you don't like where and with whom I work. Well, that means it's time to launch a counterattack. Megan, why did you come to visit your sister this week? I asked in an even voice. What a witty question, she said sarcastically. You yourself know why. We discussed this before I came here. It was a lie, and you know it, I stated in the same measured manner. So what was the real reason? Come on, tell me, since you're such an all-knowing son of a bitch, this liar scoffed again. Megan, why did you and Nancy go to Planned Parenthood on Wednesday? Looking into her eyes, I laid out my first trump card. The kitchen suddenly became very quiet. My beloved wife seemed to shrink a little in size and began to fidget slightly in her chair. It seems that some of her bravado has also disappeared somewhere. I don't understand what you're talking about, she muttered a couple of tones lower. I leaned over the table, bringing my face closer to her, and asked in a quiet, gloomy tone, For what purpose did you pay Planned Parenthood $800 in cash? Bam. And here comes below number 2, which seems to have led to some kind of knockdown, because this time there was no response at all from the other side of the table. Megan seemed to be looking in my direction, but her gaze seemed to be directed anywhere but at me. It was obvious that she was feeling quite awkward right now. You could even hear her swallow, as if she had something bad tasting stuck in her mouth. So why did you make an appointment at Planned Parenthood for 11 in the morning? What exactly were they going to do for you for the $800 you paid them? I continued to actively press Megan, not giving her time to take a break and come up with new lies. Damn you, stop bothering me with something you have no idea about. It's none of your damn business why I was there or what I did. The wife's anger flared up with renewed vigor, forcing her to raise her voice. Megan, they perform abortions at Planned Parenthood. I countered her attacks with my knowledge. You know it, I know it, and everyone in this town knows it. And since I tied myself up a long time ago for your convenience, why on earth did you need to have an abortion? I, I think your operation wasn't as successful as you think, she said. Maybe you better check yourself. In response, I took out another envelope that was waiting for its turn. Here are 3 laboratory reports, from 2 months ago, from a month ago, and from last week. In bed, I only shoot blanks, and I have all the documents confirming this. Now, Megan, would you like to show me the report from Planned Parenthood that says you are not pregnant? You are a real son of a bitch, she snapped, not wanting to give up even in the face of obvious and indisputable facts. But this is still not enough to justify a divorce. Why the hell not just admit that you've been messing around with Kirk Langford for the last 6 months and get it over with? We are both adults and know what really happened, and you continue to blatantly lie and dodge. I couldn't stand it. This time I flared up. Because you have no evidence that I did anything with anyone other than you, she snapped. And in general, I don't want to sit here for a minute longer and listen to you rant about something that never happened. So you never had sex with Kirk Langford? I said no. She exploded. I am your wife, and I only had sex with you. Then how the hell did you get pregnant? For the first time after Jesus, the Holy Spirit descended on our sinful earth, and the second immaculate conception happened. A painful silence fell between us. The nervous Megan bit her lower lip hard, her eyebrows knitted together, and an alarming crease appeared on her tense forehead. There was no way she could answer this question without incriminating herself. Did you satisfy his manhood? I asked directly. No, I didn't do that, came the answer, too hasty to be true. I pulled out a stack of photographs from my trusty manila envelope. 6 colorful photos appeared on the table proving that she was lying. Now her face has turned pale. Did you have sex with him? I asked a new question. There was no answer, and I laid out a solitaire game of 6 more photographs on the table, in which they were friends with their bodies in different poses. When I put another stack of photographs on the table, she couldn't stand it and started screaming at me. Stop it, that's enough. Damn it, enough. Okay, fine. I see that you were spying on me, Megan snorted with venom in her voice. I would have thought that she would break down and be ashamed of her betrayal, but that was not the case. I became the main accused again. You're a damn mean son of a bitch, you know that, she angrily attacked me. If you knew something was going on, why didn't you just stop it like a real man? Nuo, all you do is sneak around and take pictures like some dirty pervert. I'm sick of your pathetic whining. Just at that moment, my cell phone rang, and I took it from the table. Hi, Dad. Okay, 10 minutes will be just right. Thank you for calling. As soon as I disconnected, she immediately blurted out. What does all of this mean? This means that Dad is already taking your things here to Nancy. He should arrive in about 10 minutes. By the way, our house now has new locks. If we forgot to pack something, just let me know, and I will pass it on to you. Megan's face turned into a frozen mask, and she was petrified in her chair, unable to utter a word. I took out something else from the same envelope. Here are the documents for your car. I copied them to you. Here in this envelope is half the money from our bank accounts, about $1,200. Having pushed the envelope with all the papers to the other edge of the table, I continued. As for the children, here is my proposal. You will have the right to see them once a week. Once a month, I am willing to allow you to stay in the house overnight, provided that you make a written statement about your connection with Kirk Langford, and it will be certified by a notary. Oh, I almost forgot. I raised my finger up. I still have a DVD that I didn't have time to show you. It contains a recording of your and Kirk's visit to the Scandia Motel on May 10th. The video lasts 2 hours, and it shows very clearly and in all details how you two are tumbling there and doing everything that is shown in these photographs. Having collected all the pictures on the table into a pile and waving them in the air, I said, Just so you know, I personally didn't do any of them. I really didn't care what you did with him. I just really don't like being taken for a fool. And the last thing, I would like to leave you this souvenir as a memory of our former love. I removed the safety pin from my key fob and handed it to Megan across the table. What? What the hell is this? She muttered, staring at this small object glinting on my palm as if it were some kind of disgusting insect. This, dear wife, is the pin that I used to poke tiny little holes in all your condoms for the last 2 months. I wonder if you know that in the last couple of weeks alone you have used 48 rubber bands. Apparently old Kirk was getting more sex from you than I ever dreamed of. He's just a fucking lucky guy. You pathetic little weasel, she squealed. This is the fucking most disgusting thing I've ever heard of. You really are a dirty bastard. No, dear, the most disgusting thing is to have sex with some asshole to whom you are not married. I may be a bastard, but you are the ultimate cheating slut. Outside the windows, the noise of an approaching car was heard. Rising from the table, I threw the safety pin that had played its role on top of the manila envelope with documents and photos. Now excuse me, I need to run. I see Dad just drove up to the house. By the way, in case you haven't noticed, you never apologized for what you did or asked for forgiveness. I don't think you deserve to remain my wife. Goodbye, Megan, and enjoy your abortion on Monday. When I finally left the kitchen, the sounds of her sobs came from behind me. Nancy, like a mother hen, rushed from the next room to comfort her sister, and Brad followed me out onto the porch. "What the hell are you doing, dude?" he exclaimed, grabbing my hand. "You two have been married for 14 years. You can't just throw it all to hell because of some misunderstanding." Misunderstanding? Brad, do you know exactly why my wife came to visit you and Nancy? I asked him sarcastically, carefully releasing my sleeve. He looked at his feet for several seconds, as if thinking. Then he looked up at me apologetically. "Sorry, Phil. Let me help you unload the pickup." We unloaded the truck in about 10 minutes. All this time, Megan's lamentations and sobs could be heard from the kitchen, intensifying and then subduing slightly. I didn't know why she was crying, and to be honest, I didn't care. Kirk and Megan were fired from Globus the following week. Megan refused to sign the affidavit. However, the lawyer said that he already had strong enough arguments for the court. After leaving Nancy and Brad's house, I heard nothing more from my loving wife after that evening. She didn't even show up to visit the children. They didn't seem to mind or miss her too much, as they had developed a good connection with Janet. We spent a lot of time together, mostly as one big, outgoing family. During this period, Janet and I did not have sex or even talk about it. We weren't going to do anything that would jeopardize both divorces. The kids and I learned a lot about Koi and had a great time watching them. Finally, after 4 months, both divorces were officially finalized. Megan never fought the inevitable, but Kirk went down, kicking and screaming loudly. He lost his home, all his financial investments, and ended up paying large monthly alimony payments. A few days before Christmas, Megan finally showed up on our doorstep with gifts for the children. I was polite to her and didn't do anything that could ruin everyone's holiday spirit. She stayed with us for about 2 hours and then left as quietly as she had come. During this time, not a word was said between us about divorce or her affair. Shortly after New Year's, I put the house on the market, and 2 months later my kids and I moved in with Janet. Kirk, I heard, took a job in Omaha, and Megan went there with him. 4 months later, her lover disappeared, disappearing somewhere in the vastness of the great American plains, without even telling her where he was going. Megan returned to Nancy after Brad left for Alaska, where he found a well-paying job on an oil pipeline. A couple of months later, Nancy received divorce papers in the mail. I'm sure these two sisters are great company for each other. Janet and I are very comfortable with each other. She adores children, and they respond to her with their sincere affection. We are planning to get married in June and are preparing for our honeymoon whenever possible. And we also remember the wise proverb, "Life experience is the best teacher. It charges dearly, but explains it clearly." Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.